Okay, we're recording. Awesome. Now we're in
Okay.
business.
And you would see my face, but my computer's camera broke about a year ago, so just have to have a black cube.
Excellent.
Um,
All right, let me share my screen.
that's
Um,
lovely. That's what I was going to ask.
all right, so you should see my IDE, correct?
Yeah.
All right, I
And
downloaded the source code. Um,
cool.
and wait a minute. I just didn't mean to do that. And I got it downloaded and all right. And I did the instructions for compiling it.
Cool.
And that did take, like, I don't know, 10 minutes or
Forever.
so.
Yeah.
And then there was the command to run the test. And I ran the test, and most of them came through. And I think there was like only 2 that it didn't come in good on. And
Well, that's a great start. I was thinking we'd walk through some of the build process, but maybe we can skip ahead then.
yeah.
Cool. So let's start with, sounds like all that's working great. Did you figure out how to run specific tests yet?
No, I have not. I just downloaded it, ran the, like the make command and stuff like that. And I'm trying to find the building. Yeah, I had to go into this document. All right,
Yeah, build.markdown. Yeah.
yeah, this is the one that I was in, and I did. I haven't done this thing about creating a firewall.
I personally haven't had to do that.
Okay, good.
Yeah, I don't know. It sounds like maybe if you're writing network applications, it can make it harass you less, depending on how your OS X is set up.
Okay, and what I did was I did this command to build everything. And that's the one that took like, I don't know, 10 plus minutes or something like that to run. And then I think it was this one that I ran next. And I ran this one, and I did not get down to the coverage one. So,
okay, let's hold off on coverage just yet, because coverage is slightly destructive of an operation. It's going to kind of rebuild all your JavaScript files and move them over. So let's start with, I'll show you how to run individual tests for starters. I think that'd be a good starting point, because when we start to, I think a good first thing to work on for this 1-month mentorship program might be for us to do a little bit of test refactoring. Let's pick a test that's, so if you look in the root folder in the code editor, if we open that test folder, most of the tests that we're going to be writing and working with are in the parallel folder. The sequential folder has tests that need to be run sequentially, because they'll have interactions that conflict. The parallel tests are able to be run in conjunction, and most tests you'll find inside this folder. And basically, what it will have is the test prefix and then the subsystem that the test is running to test.
mm-hmm.
Pretty much the convention. So if we want to take a look at one I'm familiar with, I was just doing work in the file system. So if we go down to test-mkdir is a good one. Let's go. So it'll be test-m. Oh, sorry, test-fs mkdir, I think. So let's go up a bit. Boop, 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 boop. There we go. So it's in the file system subsystem. And then you can see that it's testing some of the stuff in isolation. Let's find the mkdir test. If we go up a little bit more. There we are. So just give you an idea of how they work. And basically every test suite has there's some helpers that you have in the common file that gets brought in. So you'll see the common coming in there near the top.
Yeah.
And so that gives you some common stuff like like the temp directory helper there that's going to help you make temp directories for the tests. Rather than the tests themselves, basically you just tend to exercise the specific thing from the subsystem. So in this test, we're trying a bunch of different use cases of McDir. So give you one initial idea of something we could do. If we scroll down to some of the tests I've added recently. Oh, do you know what? You're on a slightly older branch than, so if you want to pull origin, how have you set this up actually? Did you fork it on your own personal account?
No, actually what I ended up doing was I went to, nodejs.org to the downloads, and they had binaries. And so I downloaded the binaries from there. So I did not do it from the GitHub repo.
Oh, cool. That's a great starting point then. I'm going to walk you through setting it up as if you were contributing to Node then. So we're going to do it slightly different.
Okay.
So what we're going to do is we're going to go to github.com/nodejs/node, I believe.
Yeah.
We're not going to clone this yet. We're going to fork it to your account. So, and this is, if you were a maintainer, this is exactly the same thing. Once you have the commit bit on Node, this is still exactly the same way that you'll develop. We bring it over to your account.
All right, so now I have it. Now I clone it down.
Yeah. I'm trying to think of a way we can do this without, well, do you know what? It's fine. We'll clone this, and we are going to have to run the build again, unfortunately.
All right, well, let me ask you this.
Yeah.
What's the difference between this that I just forked and what I downloaded from the binaries from nodejs.org website?
Just the fact that this is going to have the Git history and it's going to be a Git repo, it's going to be really close to that. I think it's probably easiest if we just rebuild though. Like I was thinking like we could try to copy the binaries over and like get it in the same state, but I think this will be easier if we just wait that 10 minutes again.
Okay, because I was thinking I could get a init on what I've just built and then just set my remotes to point to this dude.
I think it's going to confuse it because it's going to be a completely different Git history.
All right.
I'd probably do the SSH, use SSH. I think will give you less trouble. Because then it's just going to use your keys instead of using a username and password. Yeah, let's clone that. I think yes should be okay, yeah. Let's see here. Oh, do you know what? Let's get the key set up properly. Do you have, if you cat tilde slash .ssh slash ID underscore RSA dot pub. Just want to see if, I think it's an underscore, ID underscore USA RSA. Oh, sorry, it is .ssh. I'm giving bad instructions. It's in a folder called .ssh. And then I want to see if there's a file called ID underscore SSH, ID underscore, let's see what's in that folder. Just ls that folder, actually. Cool. Okay, just known host. So we're going to create a key for you for starters. I'm going to share a link with you in Slack, and then maybe when we do post-production on this video, we can share that link on the screen or something. 2 moments here. This is my favorite. GitHub has my favorite tutorial for how to generate this key that I always end up looking at because I always forget the exact incantation. Yeah. And then just make that your email. And it's going to default to the ID underscore RSA, which should be fine. Yeah, the default's fine. It's kind of, as long as you don't have one already, that's a good way to go. And I'm going to get yelled at by the internet, but I usually don't set a password. So, because that's what the RSA, so we can edit that out too and just not say anything there. But then what we can do is SSH. Oh yeah, that's smart actually. It's having you put that in your bash RC probably so that you've automatically added it. But yeah, and then it's going to have you do that SSH add, and that's what actually is going to put it into your terminal. I think I think on OS X that might get done by default. If not, we would probably eventually edit your bash RC to do one of these steps for you, just so you always have it at your available to you.
Right. And so now I need to add that into my SSH, right?
Yeah. So what we'll do is you're going to cat the public file there. You can just cat to, or that works great. Yeah. And then you go to github.com to your personal account. And they move this around constantly, but I think it's under probably your profile picture drop down and then settings. Yeah. Oh, great. And then you can do new SSH key. I usually could name it after my laptop, basically. So I'll be like, whatever helps you identify it. And then at that point, you should be able to run the clone that we were trying to run a few minutes ago. Oh, and I should say, before we get even farther, given that you're going to be a collaborator on Node probably shortly after this, do you have two-factor authentication set up on your account already?
I did at one point, but I took it off.
Okay.
I think I took it off.
We don't have to do that as part of this video, but it would be good to set up.
It's like under, yeah. I had it at one point and then I took it off.
Cool. I recommend at some point enabling that just because it gives us a lot of protection. And that recent leak on NPM was because people didn't have 2FA enabled partially. The other good thing to set up eventually is the GPG key. That will just mean that every commit you send in is cryptographically signed, and GitHub takes care of a lot of that for you. So that's worth looking up later. It's really worth doing. And I think they also have good tutorials on it.
All right, I will put that down as my to-do list of what I need to do.
I think that'd be good.
So now I can go ahead and clone, right?
Exactly, yep. Hey, this will take a little while because it's a massive history. Massive history. So what we're going to do then, before we do the build even, is we're going to add the upstream node project as an alternate branch, an alternate upstream. So basically the way the workflow works on Node is you'll work on your branch, you'll work on your fork, and then when you finally land code onto the actual project, you push to an upstream, and that's how all the collaborators work as well. So.
Okay, hold on one second. I'm going to stop this simply because I'm in my .ssh folder, and that's not where I want to be.
Yeah. I put that wherever you're most comfortable.
Yeah, I have a projects folder where I have all my work, and all of a sudden I was like, wait a minute, where is it? It's not here. All right, so over here, if I list it again, yeah, now I've got it.
Great.
So do I have to wait for it to finish downloading before adding an upstream remote?
I think so. I think it's probably worthwhile, yeah.
Okay.
It shouldn't take too long. We can just do a star wipe when you edit it afterwards or something. I'm trying to think of what docs we can start reading through in the. Let's see here. Well, I was going to have you read the build doc, but you already got through that. Yeah, we'll wait. We'll get it built and we'll get this done, and then we can try running a couple tests. And then, actually, we can walk through the code base a bit while that happens. Why don't we pop open the old editor you have that's pointing to the old version of the code base? Yeah. So what I just wanted to show, maybe pop open there's not that much convention in how these tests are written. Maybe go to github.com and I'll show you what I was doing in the most recent tests I landed. So if you go to node.js/node, and here in the web UI, click on test, and then parallel. Let's look at the McDir test as it stands right now in parallel. Yeah. Hopefully it's not truncated before then. Oh, here we are. Cool. Great. So if we scroll down to the bottom where I've added a few new tests, I've been adding comments in that kind of try to describe at least what the test case is a little bit. So if we go up even a little bit more, I'm just putting kind of like if you've ever used Mocha, I'm just saying this test case is taking the action if the folder doesn't exist. And this test case is testing ... and this test case is testing that. This is something I think that would be worth doing to more test files, just kind of describe better what each test case is doing.
Yeah.
Which, even if we scroll to the top of this file, the first few scenarios don't really have a comment on them. Like, let's see if we can figure out what they do.
So here's the first one right here.
Yeah. And I think this is just testing to make sure that it makes a folder.
Yes.
Like the normal use case of making a folder works properly.
And that the folder that you gave it exists.
Yeah, exactly. So that's just the happy path. And then the second one's happy path setting different folder permissions. So this test you'd almost want to also verify the permissions afterwards, to be honest.
Yes, because the only difference between this one and this test is passing that permissions to
exactly, yeah.
setting. So it's setting it for access for everything.
And then the next one is testing the happy path of the synchronous folder creation.
Okay. Yep.
And then what's the next one doing?
It's
testing a bunch of
It's going through a couple of things, and it's going to check to see if it will create a directory if you're sending false as the name of the directory name.
Yeah.
And then it's going to go through each one of them. It's going to check to see if it creates a folder with the name of one. And then if you give it an empty object, an empty array, null, undefined, pretty much you're getting most of the JavaScript things in there, like null, undefined, false. Maybe we could add true. Well, true, I guess, counts as one. And what it's doing is it expects an error for every single one of those.
Yeah. So again, it's testing a bunch of kind of invalid folder names and making sure we get the appropriate error for an invalid folder name. So long story short, at a high level, I guess what I'm getting at, actually, let's go back one too. I want to, if you hit the back in the browser, I want to show you one other test file. Let's fs-promises, I think it's called. OP. I noticed this one. I've just been working with this recently. So is there promises McDir, I think, maybe? Oh, there it is. Test just the plain old promises one.
Right here?
Yeah. This one, if we scroll down, we'll see that the assertions are really kind of completely different. Even down a bit more.
So it creates a function, and then it has an async function.
So it is doing a bunch of assertions, but it doesn't really describe what the different tests are it's doing.
Yep.
So
this is interesting because it's the first time I've ever seen a test written with async await.
yeah. And it's specifically because fs.promises, there's there's an experimental promises API in the file system right now that this is exercising. But what jumped out at me is that this style of writing promises this style of writing test is completely different than the other file, even though it's testing a lot of different stuff. So
yeah, what it's doing here is it's doing one async function, and it looks like what it's doing is it's trying to create a directory, set the destination, copy a file into it, and then it's doing tests to see if, is this checking permissions?
I think that's opening as R plus permissions.
Okay.
Which I think it can read and write to that file, if I recall. Or is that W plus? I don't actually. I'm blanking. I'd have to actually Google that.
So what this is doing is this in one function, it's testing multiple things.
Yeah, this is testing tons of stuff. Like if we scroll down even further, and we get to like the McDir tests, there's some I started adding if we go down a bit.
So instead of putting each one of these in its own individual test,
I come in here, you see where I start having this comment approach again?
Right here?
Yeah, so I do try to kind of isolate them in a closure and kind of start to, so you kind of start to see where one test begins and one test ends. But I was going to say, for projects, I just feel like there's room to refactor these tests a little bit, like just start to think of how we actually describe individual test cases.
So which one would you prefer doing? Have it written like this, where you're testing literally everything in one function, or for every test that you're, let's say, having a function that tests 5 things, for example, or would you rather have 5 separate tests?
Like 5 separate test files?
Well, 5 separate, asserts that it's going to be testing stuff like.
I don't hate. I think I'd like to see some more organization. And keep in mind, I'm just one of many opinions here. I think a bit more organization and standardization than this, where I don't mind how Mocha does it, where we maybe do have some test helpers that you actually have, like you say, individual, like one function at a time for these assertions. That doesn't necessarily work for some of the styles of tests. If we start to really dig into that folder, like some will be a test file that just tests one specific behavior. It will be test regression 375, and it will be 300 lines of logic to test something. But in files like these, file system tests, it seems like a lot of things are being tested in one file, and having a helper that works more like Mocha might be nice. So,
okay, because if you have it set up, all right, make this thing go away. If you have it set up like this, if, for example, if this fails, does it stop everything below it? Doesn't get tested? Is that the way that this is set up?
correct. Yeah, correct.
So basically, by putting everything in a single function, you're just making an assumption that everything's going to go through 100% success.
Yeah.
And if we did them in separate functions, at least it would, if you were testing 5 things, if you had them all in one function and it failed on the third one, it would fail, and you wouldn't get the last 2 tested. If we did them separately, then all 5 would be tested, and it would tell you that 1, 2, 4, and 5 passed and 3 failed, right?
Not with how this test framework works. I think with the way this test framework works, if we pulled it out into separate files, so if you split this into 2 files, it would run the 2 files in parallel, and you actually would have both run. But the test runner, even if we split this into functions, the test runner is still going to fail on the first failure that happens in this file, the way that test.py runs. So I think the main advantage would be it's easier to read the file, and it might be a little more clear where exactly it failed. Like, because when the test suite fails right now, you'll be told test fs promises failed on line 209, say, which is, I mean, that tells you what you need to know.
Right.
But it might be nice to know the specific test create directory with these file permissions failed. Like, it just gives you a little bit more semantic information when a test fails, which I think would mean when you're running the suite, it's a little easier to dig into.
Okay.
But this is just a project idea. I'm just thinking of fun stuff we could work on.
All right, let me ask you this. So what your goal is to go through and start looking at these tests and add a little bit of like comments so that it gives an idea of exactly what the thing is about to do.
Yeah.
And then the other one is, do we have any outstanding open issues on test where we actually need to write test, or do we want to focus on just adding to current test or refactoring them by adding, better comments and maybe changing the test script around, or what that?
I think that's another fun project too. And that's what once we finish compiling, I'll walk you through that as well. Because we have, we publish the coverage reports online, I think almost every night. So that could be a good place to start too, is we look for something that doesn't have a ton of coverage and write a fun little test for it. So those are the 2 projects I have on my mind right now that I think are good intro projects, are reading through some of the tests and trying to add some more semantics to them, and maybe looking for some parts of the code base that don't have quite as much coverage as we want and improving that.
Okay.
Unfortunately, with the coverage, I think the coverage is pretty good. That's not unfortunate, but it means that we're getting to the point where some of the tests are really complex. We would need to write to increase it. Let me share that with you.
All right.
Here we are. Oh, the coverage seems to, that's the C++ coverage. Okay. So the coverage does keep inching up. You see that link I shared in Slack? So if we click on the 95.3%, then we'll get to start to drill down and see where we're kind of not really nailing it.
So it looks like DNS is one of the lowest areas.
Yeah.
BM would be next. So you're saying just start drilling down in here?
Yeah. Yeah, and if you click promises.js, oh, this is great, actually. It looks like just someone hasn't written a ton of tests for this yet. But you start to see exactly the methods that need to get exercised. It looks like there's something done there, right?
Down, you mean these?
No, if you go up, any of the red lines have never been touched by the code base.
Okay.
So this is saying that you're trying to look up DNS, I guess, for a non-SSL connection, I guess, or on a non-SSL connection. So it looks like, I'm not quite sure why that line's never touched. I'd have to start, I don't know enough about this library yet to really know.
So
I find it interesting that create lookup service promises just never hit.
right here, the create lookup service.
Yeah, it looks like we just never run that function.
So we never run the function in the code itself, is what you're saying.
We never run that function in any of our unit tests.
Okay. So
Yeah.
what we would need to look at would be, I don't know if this would be under DNS-promises test file or something like that.
Exactly, yeah.
And then look to see if there's anything on there written for that. And then if not, see if we can write a test that would test that function right there.
And then we'd see these lines turn to green.
And they turn green. Okay, well, good. This is interesting to see how all this works. So we would have basically the same issue with this function also.
Exactly, yeah.
All right.
And then part of this function runs, but then we must return before we ever get down to this request.family bit. So probably we return on line 70. I'm guessing we always return on line 75, maybe?
Yeah, right here with this.
Yeah, or I guess we probably return on 63 too. So I would guess just one of the cases always gets hit. So you're either returning on 63 or 75. So you never actually hit 78 through 89. I'll admit I don't know that much about the DNS libraries though, so we'd have to kind of start to learn how the DNS libraries work to start to understand why this function's not hit.
Yeah, because then we would have to figure out how a test scenario where this wouldn't be hit, this wouldn't be hit, so therefore it would drop down to here.
Exactly, yeah. And generally just when you're rating those tests, you want it to be like an actual thing that someone would be doing with the API such that it would exercise this code. You kind of know it. So we don't want to like write something contrived where we reach in and just execute this function just for the sake of hitting these lines. It's better if we can write a test that's along the lines of, when I try to connect to an HTTPS endpoint and this occurs, then I receive an error. If we can think of, a scenario that would make sense, and then as a side effect exercises this code.
Okay, so let's go back and look at where you had started writing code. So you started writing them in FS, correct?
Yeah, I had tests reaching into FS. So if we click that, then we can even look at the promises. Oh, this is great. There's actually looks like this hasn't had a ton of tests written for it yet either. So are there any functions that just straight up aren't executed, I wonder? That'd be an easy starting point. Looks like it's pretty good.
Yeah, so it looks like the only thing that it's not testing are some exceptions.
Yeah. That one's interesting though. Let's look at go down a little bit to that one. What function is that?
You change mode on the local file.
Gotcha. That makes me think it always hits the error, maybe. So this might mean there's a test for the error case, but not a test for the happy path. So that might be a really easy starting point for a test to rate.
So what you would test is where you come in here where the symlink isn't undefined. So
yeah, exactly.
It would come down to this.
Yeah. 2 seconds. I'm running out of power here. And I get my computer plugged in before I disconnect you. How's our compilation doing?
Let's go back and check on that. It is still going. Still going.
I was going to find the docs for you on test coverage, because there's a way for us to run test coverage in isolation for this sort of thing, so that you can actually see that you've hit the lines of code you think you're hitting. And this is, I actually wrote this, so I should remember it, but I completely do not. So let me find the doc for you. I think there's actually a coverage doc, maybe. Maybe it's under guides.
Under Node.js?
Yeah, maybe it's tests, I think. Or I always forget where this is. Let me pop open my code base. Maybe just contributing that markdown, and then I think it links to another document. Contributing talks about how you should write tests. Does it? Maybe it doesn't.
The guide on writing test. What about that?
Yeah, that sounds perfect. Where do you find that?
I'm in Node, and what I did was there's this guide on writing tests and the contributing guide.
Oh, cool. Yeah.
So
there should be a bit in there about coverage.
And this is how to write a test. All right, so we have what we should return.
Oh, there's a separate test coverage section even. So
so not this document that I'm in?
No, it looks like there's one. It looks like it's in the pull request markdown. Here we are. Yeah. Share the link with you.
So it's this command right here, or?
So it's going to be that command when we're done building. But then what we can do is we can run this lower command here. Will let us run the test in isolation with coverage. So it's going to give us the coverage for just one set of tests, which is important because running the full suite takes like 30 minutes with coverage turned on.
Nice. All right. So if we wanted to test like the FS section, so
yeah,
do I just replace this with FS?
Exactly. Yeah. I think we can even drill down further and make it like FS-promises. Maybe we'll try.
Okay.
But then what's nice is then we're going to just keep running that one command while we try to write a test that exercises that code we know is not being exercised. And then we'll know the second we've actually written the test for that one line of code, and then we're like, aha, we've hunted it down. Then it becomes like a video game because we're watching red lines go to green lines. So that's, I think, what makes test coverage kind of fun.
All right, I'm putting both of these in my notes so that I can keep good notes for the next person that comes along.
Cool.
And you're saying that this first command right here takes about 30 minutes to run?
No, it should be pretty fast. It's just running the full test suite once you've instrumented it for coverage takes a lot longer because it adds a lot more, it slows it down a ton. So things that used to take a second to run now take 5 seconds to run, basically.
Okay.
I'm working on a long-term project to address that.
All right.
My coworker was talking to me about what actually happens when you run make, though. It's kind of an interesting aside. If you bring up the code base in your text editor, if we go all the way, if we close the test folder, which is taking up most of our left-hand real estate there, there's so I can show you the other folder. The source folder, that's our C code. So that's kind of Node.js has V8, which is a C++ code base, and it has libuv, which is a C code base. And those represent the JavaScript language and your kind of file system API, which are kind of the C bits of the code base. If you then look in that lib folder, which is 3 up from there, that's the JavaScript bits of the API. So a lot of the Node, a good chunk of the Node API is written just in JavaScript. So if you look in fs.js, that kind of midway down there, yeah, you're going to see the functions we're used to calling like mkdir. You should see mkdir somewhere in that file, basically. And it's going to match what you're used to using from the file system API. So you've probably called mkdir or mkdir sync before.
Yeah.
That binding line, though, that's near the bottom, that's what actually calls into the C++ libraries to perform the operation at the C level. So what happens when we instrument it for test coverage is all these files get rewritten to have line counters so they know which lines are being run. And then all these files actually get put into the node executable. So all the JavaScript's actually written into the node executable. When you make it for coverage, it's instead of this code being written in, it's going to be this code plus line counters written in. But it means every time you do an operation, you're actually running 10 times as many, kind of 10 times as many things are happening.
So if it calls into the C++ lines, when it runs the test, do these line numbers get incremented based on however many lines of code that this comes from?
These lines will be incremented only once. Well, they'll be incremented for each time you execute the lines, but we won't have any test coverage for everything that happens inside the C bits. That's not covered. We don't know anything about that. So we'll just know that binding mkdir has been called once. We won't know what happened inside there, like kind of as a black box.
Okay.
But then there are also C tests, C coverage tests. I don't know how those work. But we do have test coverage for C as well.
Yeah.
If you go back to the website, you'll see that like we have 91% C coverage. I've never looked at that part of the code base, but I assume it does something kind of similar. So actually, out of curiosity, let's click on one of those and take a look at what happens inside.
It looks like somebody hard-coded that number.
Can you click on? Yeah, can you click on it?
Like it was like 91.1.
So let's look at node_file dot. I think it's fs_file. I think. Maybe it's node_file.cc. Maybe.
Source fs_event.
No, I think it's node_file.cc. Maybe. Node_file.
There we go.
If you pop that CC file, when we call the binding, we're actually calling mkdir in here. So there's a function in here called mkdir. It's in this case, because there's different coding conventions, it's going to be uppercase M, uppercase K. But if you search for uppercase M, uppercase K, you should see the corresponding code. There we are. So that's when you call the binding, this is the code that actually gets run.
Okay.
But you can see that we're doing it in a different way than we are with the other. This is just way too much information, kind of more information than we need to write this first test, but just kind of
exactly
hopefully shows how the sausage is made to a certain degree.
This is a very good introduction. Let me see where we stand. Dang thing is still running. Okay.
But I think we've got a good starting point, though, right? We'll try to hit one. We'll try to hit one of those functions we haven't hit yet. And then once you have, I'm happy. I can help just socially to rate the pull request appropriately and just kind of make sure that we get it landed easily.
Okay, because I am on, so far I'm on this step right here and getting this new build done. So then I just need to verify everything, and then I don't know if I need to do this after I've done this command, or do I need to load back?
You don't need to do that one, really. I think
Right.
it should. I think I'd jump right ahead to the rating test. Was it the rating test document we were reading? Or was it the contributing document? There was one that had the test coverage information.
Yeah.
Maybe it was the farthest right. It might be that pull request not marked down. Yeah. Yeah, here we are. Yeah. So I think what we would do next is the coverage bit of this. Go down a bit more. There's the coverage section. Because it has you do make with a slightly different. Here we are. So you're going to be running make coverage. And you need to run configure with dash coverage too, it looks like.
All right, so you're saying right here.
No, up a bit near the fold, /configure dash coverage and make coverage.
Got it.
You'll run that first, and then you'll run the part that says CI_JS_suites. And we'll run the FS suite instead of the child process suite. And I think you can drill down even more specifically. We'll just need to remember how. I think you can get as specific as FS-promises maybe.
So you're saying right here, well, it doesn't give examples of how to put in for the child process, like where you're saying FS promises. So, but basically you're saying replace child process with FS promises, promises.
Replace it with FS first to make sure that works. And then I think try to drill down a bit further and try FS-promises.
Okay.
I think it just checks the file name and makes sure it matches some portion of it. I think that's how it works. I forget. I actually implemented that part, I think, and I forget how I implemented it. Feel free to edit that part out too. It's like the only Python file in the code base too, and I haven't written Python in years. I don't think many people here write Python. I could be wrong. Maybe a lot of people do.
All right, so now that we've looked at this and you've given me that introduction, so my next question would be in test, is there any particular one that you recommend that I start looking at? Maybe give it, well, okay, it truncated, but
yeah.
Give me like 2 or 3 to look at, and I'll start looking at them. And then the one that I think would be the easiest one for me to tackle, I'll start looking at it. And then I can hit you up on Slack. And if I have any questions or any problems, and then if I feel like I've got something in, I'll send it to you to look at, and then see if I'm going in the right directions and getting my first test written.
That sounds good. I think based on that coverage file we saw, which said that one of the FS promises functions just hadn't been executed, really, I think our best bet might be test-promises.js, I think it's called. Or no, test-fs-promises.js. And I think that would be a good place to put the missing, to exercise that one missing function, which was I think the lstat function looked like it wasn't run.
Okay.
Right? I think that would be a good one. Let me see what else is here, if I have any pet peeve ones. I think the test fs mcdir would be good to make it consistent, because we describe what half the functions do, but not what the other half of the functions do. That one's just fresh in my mind. I'm popping open the test folders myself to see if anything jumps out at me. There's so many, they're all over the place, and unfortunately, I think we need to, there's even maybe meta room to rate best practices. I'm looking at test assert async.js right now. And it uses that methodology that I saw in those other files, that it encloses each test in a closure, just so you can kind of see how they lump together. I think that approach is good. This was, take a look at
So this file right here?
test-assert-async in the test folder. So try hitting Apple T. Is this VS Code?
It's actually IntelliJ. It's not VS Code.
I don't know the shortcuts then, but yeah, click parallel. It's like middle of the screenish. There we are. There's test assert async near the very top there. Yeah, I like this methodology people are using, where they enclose everything in brackets, just kind of almost just as a logical enclosure. And the other advantage to that is the constant variable will bind to the top closure, so it means you can use the same variable name over and over again, even though const won't let you in the same scope use the same variable name.
Right.
So that's the advantage of having it in that enclosure. The nice thing is they also are able to add comments and say, like, this next block that's happening will be doing this thing. This next block that's happening will be doing this thing. I think this is a good pattern, and I've seen this in a few files. And I think any file you find that is not following this pattern might be worth moving towards it. But that includes, even in this file, I think we should try to, for the record, write down what each of these tests is actually doing. Because right now you have to read all this code to know what it's doing. Like, I don't quite know what the code's doing there. I have to backwards engineer it, basically.
Okay.
So, yeah. I have to take off relatively soon, but is this kind of a good first kick of the can here?
It is. I think it's an excellent, good one. Now, I'm going to, well, it's still running, so hopefully it will finish up soon. But probably like in the next 5 minutes, it should be finished. And then I've got it. I can delete the copy that I had downloaded before and go from there. And then I can just start looking at, FS promises, look at writing more comments in for the FS make dir and the assert async.
That sounds great. And then you can work backwards to try to get a few of the red lines green, and I think that'll be pretty rewarding.
Okay.
The other thing, I don't remember off the top of my head where it outputs the coverage information to, but I think it's to a folder called coverage. So after you run the tests with that line that says CI JS suites, child process, CI native suites make coverage.
Yeah. All right. Hold on 1 second. Alexa, stop. Sorry about that. I'd set Alexa to do an alarm from when we were originally scheduled to meet. So.
I have trouble with those. I'm yelling I can't handle Siri or Alexa. I'm the worst. I'm a Luddite.
I love my Alexa because I've got like all my lights and everything else in my home configured where I can just say, Alexa, turn this on, turn this off, turn the fan on, do like whatever. The only problem that I have is that Georgia just passed a law that if you're on your phone while driving, you can get a ticket and a fine. And so now when I get in the car, I just put it in the cup holder, and then I just like, Alexa, play podcast, or Alexa, turn on Audible or something like that. And now I find myself, I get in the car and I'm like, Alexa, play podcast, and nothing happens. And I'm like, well, I can't pick my phone up. So I'm like, Alexa, play podcast. And then finally I'm like, damn it, Siri, why can't you answer to Alexa?
One of my best friends works on Siri, so I feel like I've been trolling him for years.
Yeah, it's interesting because the lady that's the voice of Siri lives here in Atlanta.
Oh wow!
Yeah.
So anyways, I was just going to say, once you finish running the tests with make coverage, you should see a folder that is called coverage, I believe. And inside that folder, you'll see those same HTML files that we were looking at online. So you can just open them up locally. And because you're seeing them, because you'll only be running a subset of the tests, you'll see just red everywhere except for whichever tests you ran. So you have to run the full suite to see it, to have it be the same as online. But when you're just trying to rate tests, so the way I would probably do it is read the coverage reports online and then rate, but then only a subset of the test suite, and just look at the coverage that's targeting the subset that you're working on. Otherwise, you'll spend 15 minutes running the test suite over and over again, which will drive you bonkers.
Okay. How many people do y'all have now that work on the tests?
I don't really know. I've just contributed to them over the past couple years on and off because I maintain some of the coverage stuff outside of the Node project. So I maintain Istanbul, which is used for the coverage. So I've been involved once or twice. I just very recently became a Node contributor. Like I was added like a month or two ago. So I'm still learning the bureaucracy myself. I think the testing group has at least 10 or 20 people in it, though.
All right. Excellent.
I don't think you're going to step on anyone's toes at all. Like especially for this thing where there's a convention you see kind of flowing in. It just hasn't been done to all the files. I think that everyone will just thumbs up that, no problem.
Okay.
So yeah, that was a very non-answer though. So I can find out that information for you.
All right, that's good. This has been a great first day, first meeting for us to do. I'm going to go ahead and as soon as we finish up, I'm going to stop sharing to stop the recording. I'm just going to put the recording as is up without editing anything out. Is there anything that you wanted edited out?
I don't think so. As long as I didn't say anything incriminating. I don't think I did.
Dang.
The only thing I'd recommend is that you maybe double check for any secrets that might have been up on your screen. And when you generated those GitHub keys, just make sure you never concatenated that you never showed the private key on screen. I don't think you did.
Right.
But that's the only concern I'd have.
Okay. All right, perfect. I will put those up and then I will put them into a playlist on YouTube. I'll send you a link to it. And then the goal is to keep putting these on there, and I might do a couple of like just quick videos after this to talk about the process and whatnot, just so that they can have that record keeping for the next class that comes in.
Lovely. And just ask me questions in Slack if you bump into any roadblocks, and maybe we can plan for, next weekend might work well for me if we want to do another like hour, even 2 hours online again.
Okay. Next weekend might be a little bit of a challenge. And the reason why I say that is, have you ever heard of Free Code Camp online?
I have, yeah. I'm not too familiar, but I've heard of it.
The guy who started that just recently announced their top contributors to the Free Code Camp organization, I guess was what you can call it. And they're having an awards ceremony for the top contributors in New York City on Saturday. And so I will be flying up to New York City Saturday because I've been recognized as a top contributor.
Oh, that's awesome.
And getting my reward and then flying back literally on the very first flight Sunday morning.
Okay.
And, so I could maybe do Monday evening, if that's possible.
That could work, or we could do Thursday, or we could probably do Thursday too. The only thing is by the time I'm done work, it's a little late your time is my only concern, but we can work it out.
Okay, good. Because my mom's having an issue with her liver, and she's going to be in the hospital Thursday. And then I will be going in Thursday after work, spending the night in the hospital with her and staying until she gets out of the hospital Friday evening. And
let's asynchronous, and then unless there's any major blockers, we can just try to address it in Slack, and then plan on Monday. Then that's fine for me.
Perfect. All right, good deal.
My only other concern is I'm going to Burning Man at the end of the month with my girlfriend, so but I'm only going for 3 days, but I'll be unavailable for like 5 days basically. But unfortunately, it's a 1 month trial period, so I just want to make sure that we work around that properly.
So what dates are you going to be out?
That is the very end of August through, I think, the 2nd of September. I need to bring up a calendar. I'll bring up a calendar right now. Let's see here. I guess the 29th of August through the 2nd of September.
Okay.
And I'll just be basically completely off the grid during that period. So we'll just need to plan around that.
Is it your first time going?
I went 5 years ago and it was really fun. And it's my girlfriend's first time. So I'm pretty excited. And she's a fine arts major. So I think she'll have a blast. So lots of amazing art there. It's really quite beautiful. Okay. Well, thank you so much. I really enjoyed this first session. I'm glad we kind of hit the ground running with some stuff. So,
excellent. I wish I had forked it right and could have saved a little bit of time. But it's good to go through it again to get it right so we can have it documented for the next person.
Yeah. Oh, and remember, we still are going to want to add the upstream for you too, which we haven't yet. So you just call it, the convention is you just call it upstream, and that's going to point at the other SSH URL, which is the node repo itself.
Yep, I can add that in so that I have it.
Yeah, and then what we're going to occasionally do is you're going to pull the upstream onto your main one and then push it back up to yourself, just so you're basically always tracking the latest. Tracking the main node project.
Okay.
All right, well, I'm going to let you go. Take care. Have a good start to your week.
All right. Thanks, Benjamin. All right. Bye.
Take care.